Hey 522 crew, it's your girl Christine, and I'm super excited. You know who you came here for, right? It wasn't for me, unless you're my family and friends, and if so, I love you, thank you. But everyone else, I came for Lecrae too, so it's okay. And if you don't know who Lecrae is, I mean, really, it's okay. You're gonna learn after this video. He is a multi-Grammy winning, Reach record label creating, rap phenomenon. I mean, legendary, okay? Legendary. Father, husband, author, philanthropist. I could go on, but why would I need to? Let's get into the interview. You want to hear it, right? You want to see it, right? Then let's go. Hi, Lecrae. How are you?
I brushed my teeth this morning, so I think I'm all right.
That's a plus. I'm so excited. We have so much to talk about. Let's get into it. I'm a fan of the music, of course, but your book, I Am Restored, I'm not gonna lie, I've been like consuming it. It's been so good. So seriously. Before we get into all of that, how are you? You know, pandemic life, it's different, right? This press push is a little different than it's been in the past.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
You know what? I'm making the best of it. I mean, there's some things that I just think are not going to be the same. So I'm not like comparing and saying, oh, I just wish this was this. I'm just like taking it as it comes and saying, hey, I don't know how long this will be our new normal. So let's just make the best of it.
So one thing that's really cool about how you're approaching this whole situation is you are not just relying on, touring, or a book. You're doing multiple things at the same time to kind of keep things flowing, which is amazing. So let's talk about one of those things that I love personally that came out during the pandemic, your book, I Am Restored. And for the people who have read Lecrae book before, Unashamed, this is not that, right? Even though they're both accounts of your life, they're both really transparent. What would you say is the difference for people?
I think for Unashamed, you get to understand more of my story for sure. For Restoration, you can see how my story created problems and issues in my current world. And you can also see how I've been able to navigate that. So some people, you can look at the chaos, but they don't know how to find hope in the chaos. And I think what this book allows people to do is find some hope in the middle of the chaos, whether it's racial chaos or political chaos, religious chaos. There's a thread of how I've been able to navigate it, because it's been chaotic, but God has been faithful to me in the process.
For sure. Yes. And one thing I love about the book is you talk about therapy, which is a lot more socially acceptable than it used to be, but still it can be a stigma to some people, right? There are people who haven't decided to take that leap into the realm of therapy. So why was that so important for you to mention and to talk about and to push with your own experiences in this book? Was it hard to talk about, or?
I think it's different. It's going to be different for everybody, but I think for me, it's liberating. When you're doing it in therapy, obviously it's hard because you're trying to reconcile it and figure out, like, what does this mean? And you're coming to some conclusions you never realized, and they're devastating. And you're just dealing with all those raw emotions in that moment. And I think that's what people are afraid of, is confronting those. But in the book, I'm on the other side of having to deal with all of those particular things. So I'm able to just say, here it is, y'all. And I know people are going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he told this. Wow. But it's all the ability to tell it came from having some tough moments over the course of a couple years. And I think, I hope that people will find some healing in that process, because it's tough. It's really tough. And I think for me, as life got tougher, I was holding on to my religiosity and my religious views as far as like, Western medicine or even Eastern medicine, just saying, no. And instead of saying, all right, I'm gonna open my hands up and say, maybe God put all this here for me to be benefited by, and once I started to do that, I found the opposite of my fear happened. My fear was that I was going to be exposed to something crazy and go off the deep end. But because that was my fear, I was actually very cautious and very mindful of it. So the thing I was most afraid of is not going to happen because I'm thinking about it all the time. So I opened up my hand to therapists and just some of those processes, and I realized, you know what, we tend to only do that. We do a lot of it because of misinformation. We tend to be afraid of therapy and so on and so forth because mostly we don't understand it or we don't know. But nobody would ever say, I'm trying to lose this extra weight, so I'm praying a lot more. Nobody would ever say that. They would go put in the work. And in the same way, when it comes to your brain, I think we just think that's just this, it's completely spiritual. And there's no physical components that specialists can help us with. And I think that's the misinformation that we have.
So something that's super cool about you as a celebrity, you're not scared to admit some of your flaws, the unflattering moments, right? You're not only focused on this highlight reel. In your book, you admit some dirty details about your life and even some little things that normal people probably wouldn't want to put on Front Street, okay? You're real about those times you took an L and you lost some fights, You're honest and you're transparent. Why is that important for you to share those moments that might not be flattering, that might make you look crazy? Why is that something that you have decided to put out there for us, to share with us?
I think I did that for two reasons. I think one reason I did it was for myself, because it's the practice of being authentic and being honest for my own self. Because when you can see yourself for who you are, then you can have more clarity and you can move forward. And I think that was important for me. But then I think it was important for other people because we put up these walls and we tell these pretty stories about ourselves, and everyone, you never hear about the stories where people were like, no, I lost that fight, or all the embarrassing things. But the truth of the matter is, you're never going to find healing. There's more people who lost than who won. You know what I mean? And you're never going to find healing until you start acknowledging those particular things. And maybe you're too afraid to. So I'll do it for you. Let me do that for you to give you that freedom to be able to express those things in your own life.
Okay, so that sounds good. And I appreciate it. But being honest, was there any part that you were like, I don't know if I should put this out? That you were nervous to put out, that you just didn't know whether you should do it or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think what they tell you to do when you write a book is write it as if it's a diary at first. You know what I mean? Write it as if nobody will ever read it. Nobody will ever see this, and write it as if everybody's dead who you're gonna be talking about. And then come back and look at that and say, now, imagine everybody's gonna see this. How do you feel? And so when I initially wrote it as if nobody would see it, I sat back and I thought about it and I said, how would I feel if everybody read my laundry right here? And I just thought to myself, man, I've seen too much healing come from other people, being exposed. So the couple of things that I was nervous to talk about was, one, my marital issues, because everyone wants you to have this pristine thing and just like, everything's perfect at home. Actually, I grew up in an era of bravado and just tough guys. So all of my admitting where I was weak and afraid and running was tough to put out there. I think the sexual abuse would have been tough to put out there, except that I had done so much processing and so much work on that one, because that was a big piece of my story that I was more comfortable putting that out there.
I gotta say, I appreciate it because, like you said, that transparency lets people know I'm not the only one, or, now I can share. And, things like your abuse, I've read about it in the past, I've seen your interviews. But yeah, there were some things that I was like, oh, I didn't know that. So.
Yeah. Another thing I can think of is that I'm sure people over the last couple of years may have had a picture of me just being perfect and just admitting like, no, it wasn't pretty over the last couple of years. So just telling those stories was, I had to put it out there.
For sure. Your transparency is definitely inspiring. And even in the area of substance abuse, which I love because we don't address that in the Christian community, right? Substance abuse is something that's over there, or something that we were delivered from, that we came at it from. But, you are real in saying like, listen, I pop pills. I used to, be legit borderline alcoholic, and it's something that's super important for me to see, just given awareness about. So what would you say to somebody who is currently struggling in that, who may not know how to approach the conversation, who may not be ready to approach the conversation?
One is, don't be ashamed or embarrassed by it, because I think oftentimes we're so ashamed or embarrassed that we don't want to acknowledge it or confront it, because it becomes this private secret thing instead of being a real issue that you have that you got to wrestle through. And two, like you said, we normalize so much. Like, you may have to step back and have some professional people look into it, because I'd be hard pressed to tell you I had a drinking problem, because I was like, I know people with drinking problems. I seen winos on the corner growing up. I'm a functional human being. I'm getting it done. I'm out here touring the world. I'm impacting people. I'm doing all this stuff. What are you talking about? But I think the profession, that's my limited understanding of what a drinking problem is. And so the professionals would say, nah, this is not normal behavior. You're a binge drinker for sure. You know what I mean? And so, I will hope people would do more investigation and say, wow, because denial is one of the first problems when you have a problem with something. So that's one of the first roadblocks. So hopefully they can get out of that place of denial and shame. Shame will keep you bound too.
100%. Love that we can talk about that. One thing that I learned about you through just your interviews and reading your book is you being honest with your need for affirmation and how that has gotten you into spaces that aren't necessarily healthy. So that's something that I can relate to, just needing to be affirmed. So where are you now with that, and how did you come out of it? Did you come out of it? Let's talk about it.
The key is even understanding that it exists. So that was the biggest thing, is most of us who feel this burning desire to be affirmed, we don't know the root of it. We don't know where that comes from. And we're just aimlessly looking, and we need it in all these different places. And I think we look for healthy versions of unhealthy versions of affirmation because they're more readily available. We know that's what we know. The healthy versions of affirmation are not the ones that are advertised or presented as often. So for me, it's knowing the unhealthy ones, or just put it like this: it's knowing that I'm prone to this, and that there's always opportunity for me to believe a lie. And so now, I've been so exposed to healthy versions of affirmation, which come from close relationships with friends. It does not have to be the opposite sex, which a lot of us think. It's like, oh, it's got to be the opposite sex for me to matter. Close relationships with friends, ultimately your faith in God, where you can stand on who He says you are, and understanding your personality. And I think when you have community and when you have your faith, you can get that in a healthy way, and you don't have to warp it. And so it's like looking at studying a diamond. If I study the diamond long enough, I don't have to study all the fakes. I know a fake as soon as it pops up because I studied the real one so much. So now when the false senses of affirmation rise up, I can say, nah, I know what's happening here. Let me shut that down. You know, when the DMs pop up and you get the little heart kisses blowing at you, it's like, nah, that's not what that is. I know what healthy affirmation looks like. And so that's where you move to.
Hey, don't charge me for the free session you just gave me. Okay, that was therapy right there.
Yeah.
So good. That was so good. Thank you. So, since you touched on social media a little bit, you really are hilarious on social media. And one thing that's interesting is that you really engage in some deep conversation and you go there. Sometimes you talk about the topics that are a little controversial. Sometimes you talk about the stuff that's funny, but you don't block your comments. You invite people to talk, even with the trolls that's out there, even with the people who are not willing to agree and who want to spew craziness. Why do you still do this? Are you jaded? Clearly not. But, how are you mentally healthy enough to say, I'm just going to open up the floodgates and talk about some things that, some crazy people may respond to?
You know why I do it? Because now mentally healthy is the place where I had to get to for me to continue doing it. I had to get some help to understand how I can personally protect myself in this process. So I've got some techniques and tools where it's like, okay, don't ignore the critics, engage the curious, and answer the needy. That's kind of my philosophy. So a lot of times people are just critical. They never have anything. They're never there when something good happens. They don't support you when you do the right things. They're only there when something negative happens. Ignore, right? That's not somebody who genuinely cares about you. There's some curious people who, and this is the reason why I do it, because there's always a Nicodemus in the crowd who's gonna come to you at nighttime like, hey man, so what you were saying about race, man, can you break that down a little further? Those people are always there. And so I do it for them. I do it for the people who are on the wings, who don't say anything on social media, but they really do have questions and they just don't want to get caught in the fray. And then the needy are like, they don't have time to say stuff and send responses. They just need an answer. And I've been a needy person where I wasn't commenting when I was watching such and such podcasts or videos on YouTube. Dr. Christina Edmondson, I'm watching her stuff. I wasn't commenting. I'm just absorbing and saying, yes, food for my soul. And so that's why I continue to do it.
Okay, I ain't gonna lie. I be all up in the comments too. Okay. And some people are cool. Some people I agree with. Sometimes I don't agree with stuff that's being said. Sometimes I agree with you. Sometimes I don't. But what I love is the healthy discourse. It really is a blessing to just go online and to be able to kind of see a different perspective. Hopefully to keep it respectful. But, that doesn't always happen. There's some people out there that's a little,
So it is. So you gotta step back. And now my supporters have gotten to the point where I don't have to say much. They come in and clapping for me like, hold on, let me explain something to you because what you're saying is all wrong. So
yes, I appreciate that, honestly, because you know what? You don't shy away from the tough conversations, and you are a platform. And people can come here for real talk, right? Can come to your page and whatever you're doing when you're introducing certain conversations. And speaking of that, one of those conversations that you have been vocal about is political. With the elections and different things that have happened, you haven't been scared to voice what you're feeling. And we are in such a highly polarizing political climate, even amongst Christians, right? When we say like, oh, we believe in one God, that doesn't always mean we believe in the same things, right? Especially politically. And there are some areas where, there's back and forth and there's disagreement. So why do you think it's important for yourself as a believer to be a platform where people can talk about it and for you to share what you believe and just introduce that type of conversation politically?
Because it matters. I mean, I think obviously, I think when we say we're Christians, a lot of times the assumption is it's either A, I'm a Christian, so I'm voting conservatively, I'm voting with the Republican Party because I'm a Christian, or B, I'm a Christian and so I take no part in this worldly affair and I'm ignoring it all. And my thought is, if we don't say anything about it, we're leaving these assumptions on the table instead of having a different perspective. So most Christians, when it comes to areas of politics, they'll take their hands off and take their brains off, and they don't want to process it. And my view on that is, whatever you say, I don't want to engage, you leave for evil. You leave out there in the open for evil to run amok with. And so if you don't want to engage the political arena, then you're saying, well, whatever happens, happens. And I don't think that's the right answer either. So I do think we need to think critically about it. I do think that if you've been given something to steward, which is your vote, which is your voice, then think critically about that. And we may still come to different conclusions after thinking critically about it, but at least we've thought critical enough to understand the various perspectives and views, and to have a nuanced and not just a blind allegiance to a particular view, or a blind, back away from it all. So that's, my view on how that should be approached.
Yeah, that's good. I appreciate that, because you know what? You are bold enough to share your opinion while also saying, you know what? I don't have all the answers, so you may disagree, and that's okay too, right? Now, something that I think is really cool about your artistic expression is that throughout your career, you have been vocal about your different life experiences that just span everything from, the hood, having that perspective about hood activity, because that's been your experience at times in your life, and then also, knowing about the white evangelical space and how you relate to that as a Black American. But then also saying, you know what, sometimes my people, I question some stuff that y'all doing, and then standing up and being on the front lines for your people as a Black man. I think it's really important to, express those different sides of things and just think critically. And that's something that you have been doing throughout your career and have been very vocal about, even when you're searching for answers. So what made you take this approach to always be so vocal about these different experiences, just as a man, as a Black man, as a Black Christian man, as, all of these things, these experiences that you've lived through and felt in different ways?
You've lived in nuance, right? You haven't lived in one kind of world. You've lived in multiple different types of worlds. And I think more often than not, that is the experience of Black and brown people. Black and brown people have to live in lots of different spaces all the time, and they never have a place where they feel understood, and they never have a voice that expresses like, yes, that's me. Usually it's gonna be, hey, let me talk about your experience in white spaces, or not, but not in a negative way, or not in a like I need to breathe kind of way, but more so like, in an assimilated way. This is for everybody. Let's talk about what it's like for everybody. Or it's just hat off at the house chilling, boys in the hood, menace to society, picture painted for you. Rarely do we get to see pictures of us having to navigate all these different spaces. So you may be riding a train from the Bronx, into the city to go to a Fortune 500 company. And those people in that Fortune 500 company don't know what your ride was like coming from the Bronx. And so I wanted to talk about all of those spaces and places, because I know I've been on tour and I've seen these people who are like, yes, your voice is my story. And so if I have the platform, then let me tell our story collectively, at least give some glimpses of how there's hope and restoration in the midst of it.
That's so good. I feel you. Now, something that a lot of us know about you is your passion for fighting for social justice. And we've seen you just out marching, protesting in the face of injustice towards Black and Brown lives when it comes to police brutality, and just different things happening in the community. Not only that, but just uplifting the community with different initiatives that you're a part of. Now, there are so many people in the social media age who have a hard time dealing with these things because we're seeing it so much more now. We have so much more access to, the visuals, and just seeing some heartbreaking things. So what would you say to those people who are just discouraged or feeling hopeless by some of the things that they're seeing in the media and having a hard time dealing with?
I would just say that your feelings are valid, that never deny those feelings and those emotions, but you have to have healthy outlets. And I think oftentimes social media is not a healthy outlet for us when we feel these types of emotions. I think social media is great when we're creating awareness or calling for accountability. But when we're processing what we're feeling internally, it can create more confusion and it can stir up, we begin trauma bonding online and finding other people who are going through hell, and we just start lighting each other's fires, and it stirs up our, all of our internal traumas that we have. So if you can do that offline with good people, good friends around you, and bond and wrestle through some of what you're feeling, and then, speak outwardly. And of course we understand why you're saying what you're saying and acting the way you're acting. But perhaps we can be more productive. You know what I mean? We all know the aunties at the funeral who start screaming and falling on the floor in front of the casket, and it's like everyone's like, yo, we gotta get her up out of here. And it's like, that may not be the most productive way. We understand what you're doing, we get it, but perhaps there's a more productive way for us to grieve. In a different light, in a different way that's helpful for everybody and helpful for them as well.
Yeah, that's so good. Thank you. Honestly, I mean, I really appreciate you, just more than the music, more than the books and everything that you are doing and promoting. You're out here, doing your part to try to make the world a better place, starting in your community. So shout out to you. And we just are so grateful. I appreciate you sharing your time, sharing your mind, and just all that you do, because seriously, your music, your book just has been a game changer in my life, and I know the lives of a lot of people who encounter your art. So thank you.
I appreciate that. That's love, man. Next time I get out to New York, hopefully, we'll when this is all over with, we'll all connect again.
Wait, before you go, thank you so much for watching this conversation with Lecrae. You can check him out on @Lecrae on all of his social media platforms, lecrae.com. And while I spoke to him months ago during the pandemic, he dropped so many amazing things since then that you're going to want to check out. So if you like this content, I also want you to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought about this interview. And good news is, there's so much more where that came from. Check out 522culture.com, because this is the kind of content we drop all the time. We celebrate inspirational artistic expression based on Galatians 5:22. It's the fruit of the Spirit. So if you're looking for just things to uplift your soul, just more love, more joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control, we're all about that. This is the place for you to find new music, movies, fashion, books, get real about relationships, and so much more. Stay locked in with us, and we appreciate your support. Thank you so much. God bless.